This is a moment in Jewish history. I am your host, Ben Bresky, and this week we have a special interview with Yael Driver, the editor of a newly released book called Dance of the Fire, The Jewish Brigade in World War II, Facts, Myths, Appraisals, which is the English version of the memoirs of her father, Shlomo Shamir, who was the covert commander of the Jewish Brigade. Now, I did a Jewish History Moment episode on the Jewish Legion, which was in World War I, but I knew very little about the Jewish Brigade, and that's understandable, because although there's a lot in Hebrew about it, there's very little in English. I had no idea that when the Holocaust ended, Jewish soldiers fighting in the British Army, who came from the land of Israel, left Israel, and returns to war-torn Europe to track down Holocaust survivors. And when they found them, these Jews were greeted by fellow Jews wearing a blue and white Jewish star emblem on their uniforms, in stark contrast to what they had just experienced. We will learn more about that and the other daring secret missions that these volunteers undertook, and about how Yael connected to her father's old comrades and the families of the people he helped during those dark days. Yael, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, so this book was just released, and how did it come together?
The book is based on an original manuscript, which was the basis for a Hebrew book called Shlosha Nisim V'Degel Ivri, literally translated 3 Miracles and a Jewish Flag in the British Army. In the course of my endeavors to complete the original book, I worked in various archives in both Israel and Great Britain. I also communicated with Municipal Archive in Germany. I examined memoirs of my father's brothers in arms. And as a result of all these activities, I was able not only to add supporting material and references and footnotes, but also to identify many people appearing in the various photographs that were included in the book. During the work on the English book, I've even launched a worldwide search for the family of one Italian prisoner of war brought by the British from North Africa and kept for some months in Latrun, and then being shipped to India. At the time, Latrun was home to a major British P.O.W. camp. There were some 10,000 POWs there. And these POWs were guarded by soldiers of the Buff companies, we'll get to that in a minute, part of the British Army. The Italian prisoners, whose family I was searching for, gave my father a ceramic relief, which he made on site in conditions unimaginable, as a token of appreciation for what I assume has been some special relationship that the two had struck. The relief survived the last 83 years, is currently on display in my home, and I did find the family of this POW. But that's a story on the side.
Well, I'm curious, what is this relief? It's like a little statuette or something?
It's a clay relief.
And this is something that you saw as a little girl, and after all these years, you discovered the backstory?
Yes. Not only that, the relief over the last 83 years fell and broke, and my father actually mended it in a very non-professional way, I should say. And after having found the family and corresponded with the son of this POW, I gave the relief to a professional restorer, and it came back like new.
That must have been quite an interesting experience for that Italian family to be in contact with you.
Yes, and we are still talking, and we may even meet sometime, maybe in the next few months.
Now, how did these Jewish people feel about fighting with the British? I mean, some people consider the British to be almost like the enemy, and here they are joining them.
Well, the background to that, I suppose, is in short as follows. In May of 1939, the British published what was called the White Paper. And this White Paper really put an end to dreams of the Jewish self-rule in Palestine. The immigration was going to be limited. The ability to buy land was going to be limited. And after 5 years, the rule in Palestine would be by majority, which meant really all this idea of a Jewish homeland was down and done with. And so the Yishuv, the community in Palestine, was obviously very unhappy and very much against the British Mandate authorities. A few months later, September 39, the war started. The Germans invaded Poland. And so the question is, who is our enemy? Is it the Arabs who are going to be ruling Palestine eventually? Or are they the Germans who are murdering the brothers and sisters and parents of a lot of the people who were already in Palestine? And as you know, Ben-Gurion gave it a very short summary of what should be done. And he said, we'll fight the White Paper as if there is no war, and we will fight the Germans as if there is no White Paper. And that is how the Yishuv, the community in Palestine, felt. It is a dichotomy, but in the end, it was first and foremost joining the British Army to fight the Germans. At the back of the minds of many, there was also the idea that that would give some possibility of getting military training, which would eventually be useful.
So these soldiers in the British Army, they eventually formed the Israel Defense Force.
Yes, we'll get to that because, as you may know, the volunteers from the Jewish community in Palestine to the British Army, they numbered about 34,000 people. That is almost 10% of the then Jewish community in Palestine. This is an unheard of percentage anywhere in the world, but it's understandable. And when the war is finished and the soldiers came back to Palestine, 1946-47, clearly they formed the bedrock of the Israeli Defense Forces. But I would like to kind of explain a little bit how did we come to have a Jewish brigade. When the first volunteers enlisted into the infantry of the British Army, this was in 1940, they volunteered, including my father, for service in one of the oldest regiments in the British Army, called the Buffs. In brackets, the Royal East Kent Regiment. Now, the Royal East Kent Regiment eventually had about 15 companies of Jewish volunteers. In December 42, so 2 years later, the Jewish volunteers in the Buff companies were reorganized to form what was called the Palestine Regiment. 2 years later, this Palestine Regiment became the heart of the Jewish Brigade. Now, the Palestine Regiment consisted of 3 infantry battalions. For the first 4 years of the war, these 3 battalions, or the companies that made the pre-Palestine Regiment, were mostly used for frustrating guard duties, mostly in Palestine, but some in North Africa, in Cyrenaica, which is Lov, Libya today. After 4 years of struggle to be deployed as a fighting force against the Germans and their allies, and following the direction of Sir Winston Churchill in late September 44, these 3 battalions of the Palestine Regiment were grouped to form the heart of the Jewish Brigade. The Jewish Brigade eventually was about 5,000 people, but the infantry, which is what I'm talking about, were 3,000 to 3,500 men. I'm calling it the heart because the brigade also have some non-infantry units, such as artillery, transport companies, engineering companies, and other services. So altogether, they were about 5,000 men. Not all of them were Jews from Palestine because there was a shortage. Although the volunteering was amazing, there was still a shortage because there were a lot of Yishuv community people who volunteered to other parts of the British Army, be it the transport, the engineering, the map units, the Navy, the Air Force, etc. So the Jewish Brigade is only part of those who volunteered from Palestine, Jewish volunteers from Palestine. Now, the formation of the Jewish Brigade, being under a Jewish insignia and eventually a Jewish flag, sent an electric current to the Jewish people all over the world. And it strengthened the feeling of needing national self-recognition. After initial training in Egypt as a brigade, i.e. the 3 battalion with additional companies, the brigade was finally sent to Italy. That was November 1944. So not very long before the war ends. And after 3 months of training in Italy, on top of the training already in Egypt, the brigade was deployed as a fighting force on the North Italian front. This was the Allied Italian campaign.
Well, that kind of liberated Italy.
The result was not only freeing Italy, but it was also making it easier for the Allies to fight the Germans on other front, the Eastern Front, etc.
Now, Jewish people probably felt some sense of pride. It was probably a rare thing to have a Jewish star on a flag. I mean, today maybe we take it for granted that you have the Israeli Defense Force with the Israeli flag, but back then it was maybe a novelty.
Absolutely. After the war, when the soldiers were spread in Europe looking for the Holocaust survivor, for them to see a soldier with a Magen David on his sleeves and an insignia Jewish Brigade was something they couldn't believe. There were scenes of people collapsing from excitement and crying and all the rest that could be expected when you come from hell and seeing the Mashiach.
Well, I guess these people were forced by the Nazis to wear a Jewish star.
Absolutely, because as you know, in Germany, even before the war, Jews were required to wear the yellow, we call it the yellow cloth, the yellow
patch.
Yes, swatch or something, identifying them. I mean, I'm not going to all the terrible things that happened in Germany before the war and after the war, because that is a completely different subject, and I'm sure everybody would know about it and have heard about it, because commemorating the Holocaust is a very alive activity, really commemorated in almost in every country in the free world. I feel exempt from kind of delving into that. But you're right in suggesting that the meeting between the survivors and the Jewish soldiers from Palestine was a very moving event.
Why is it that your father, Shlomo Shamir, is called the covert commander of the brigade? That implies there was something secret?
Absolutely. The brigade, this was a British Army brigade, and the brigade had a British commander. He was Jewish, Brigadier Benjamin. But apart from fighting, the brigade had other issues which are to do with the Yishuv in Palestine and the survivors of the Holocaust, which were not of interest to the British. And so there was a need for somebody to be in charge, to be able to communicate with the Haganah headquarters and the political department of the Jewish Agency in Palestine in order to coordinate any activities, and I will talk about them in a minute, that were not officially sanctioned by the British. So you needed an internal command that will look after the particular issues that concerns the community in Palestine. Especially as you know that the community in Palestine was in disagreement with the British rule. So you can see that there is, on the one hand this and on the other hand that. So you needed something that would kind of guard to make sure that the interests of the issue are upheld as much as possible, while still being a soldier in the British Army.
And what language did these people speak? I mean, I assume English, but now that you're saying it, did everyone even speak English?
First of all, not everyone could speak English. Most of the spoken language internally was Hebrew. Jewish holidays were celebrated, and the signs in the camps of the brigade were in Hebrew. So Hebrew was absolutely flourishing. In 5 years, people learned the essentials of English, and even those who didn't speak English to start with actually managed to survive in English later.
And what did the British people think of the Jewish Brigade? I mean, maybe some of them were not too happy.
There were some exhibition of anti-Semitism here and there. To start with, the British didn't think that the Jews can fight, but this has all been resolved after the participation in the battles in the north of Italy. Let me just say something about the battles in North Italy. The brigade fought in North Italy in kind of two sub-fronts. The fighting time was short. It's basically 6-7 weeks before the war ended. However, they were highly praised for their performance by the British High Command. It was not a small achievement, especially, as I said, the British were not quite sure to start with whether the Jewish soldiers could fight. The two sub-fronts in the North Italian battles were the Alfonsina, which is not very far from Ravenna, where they were stationed about 3 weeks, and where they have actually had one opportunity to catch some Germans P.O.W. And this, taking German prisoners, was a major event in the annals of the history of the brigade. And it was everywhere and all over the papers in Palestine. The second front was a more difficult front. This is the Senio River front, where they've been deployed for 3 or 4 weeks, where they were replacing the Gurkhas. It was more difficult because the topography was more hilly and the enemy was much fiercer. This was the 4 parachute division of the Wehrmacht. And there the brigade fought for control of no man's land and also trying to locate points of crossing the river in front of the final battle over the Po River, the Po Valley, which was really the end of the war. As I said, they were highly praised, and the war ended, or the VE Day in Europe ended in 1945. This was a small part of the brigade real contribution to the Jewish nation, because after the war, the brigade men were deployed in the Low Countries and used it as a base to help the Holocaust survivors locally and in Germany. In order to do this, they used all sorts of tricks to hide these activities from the British, and they were extremely successful in meeting, caring, orienting and ensuring that the Sherit HaPleta, or the survivors, eventually declared Palestine as their preferred destination for immigration. This was a major, major thing to achieve. And this was a most significant contributor to the subsequent UN decision for the creation of Israel.
Where else would they have gone?
Back to their own countries, God knows, to America. America was closed, but there are people, the first inclination was going to America because that seems to be the be-all and end-all. America was not able to take them. It was closed. But still, the inquiry to find out from the survivor where they want to go, they had to declare where they need to go. And to convince them to declare that Palestine is their preferred destination was no easy task. They have been 6 years in terrible, terrible circumstances. They haven't heard anything about Palestine. What is Palestine? Who is in Palestine? Does Palestine exist? What is there? So this was an educational orienting campaign of great importance and much effort. And this is something that the brigade was involved as well. The British, after the war, established what was called the British Search Bureau in the British occupation zone. This was under the British War Office. And members of the brigade were asked to form 5 teams of language speakers, which were in no short supply in the brigade, which was one of their major strengths vis-à-vis the British Army. 5 teams to be attached to the British Search Bureau, and these teams were looking for what the British wanted to find, all sorts of people of various professions and maybe prisoners or people who parachuted in Germany and was caught, etc. The brigade members who were attached to the British Search Bureau were able to move around the British zone officially with official documents, which entitled them to get help from any unit in the zone. This was very important alongside the clandestine operation. And actually, there is another short Sherlock Holmes story here, because a couple of years ago, I was able to locate the daughter of the British commander of the Search Bureau, who turned up to be a descendant of the Jewish Recanati family. And for a long time, one wasn't sure why he was slightly accommodating the teams that were attached to the Search Bureau. And the reason has become quite clear now.
So no one knew he had a Jewish family connection until recently?
His family obviously knew. Mind you, they were looking, and I helped them look for his grandmother and great-grandmother, etc. in Italy. But apart from them, no, in the British Army, this was not something to be discussed. He was a generation down. His father was not Jewish. So nobody had to know, had reason to know, or knew. But anyway, we now, I have a very good relationship with this family now. I just want to add one other story which might be of interest, and that is the story of the search for Enzo Sereni. Enzo Sereni was a member of the Yishuv from an Italian important family. His father was the doctor of the King of Italy at the time. Anyway, he emigrated to Israel and eventually volunteered to parachute in Italy and was captured and disappeared. The Jewish community was worried and looking to find out where is he. My father was one of the people who were attached to the Search Bureau. He and 2 other members of the 2nd Battalion went on a 20-day mission to find Enzo Sereni. It's a big story and very involved, so I won't go into it. It's a whole chapter a fascinating search involving some Christian monasteries, and unfortunately it ended up by finding that he didn't survive Dachau. His wife, who also came to Italy waiting to find out whether he's alive or dead, had to find out that he's not alive. I mean, it's a long story, but it's an interesting story.
And this is after the war ended?
This is after the war ended in 1945. It's one of the trips that a team that was attached to the British Search Bureau, my father being the head of that team, has accomplished while being attached to the Bureau. And this search was formally approved, unlike other searches which were not.
You know, I would think that after the war ended, a lot of people would say, well, that's it, it's time to close up shop and call it a day. But I guess the Jewish Brigade, it kept continuing.
Absolutely. Not only the Jewish Brigade. I have to remind that the volunteers from the issue were not only in the Jewish Brigade. The Jewish Brigade was 1/5 of those who volunteered. And other people who volunteered were still staying in Europe, engaged in searching and caring for the survivors. The Jewish Brigade was a pioneer in that process. It actually established a temporary camp in Italy, in Ponteba, near Tarvisio, where the brigade was deployed after the war, before moving to the Low Countries. The brigade moved from North Italy to the Italian-Yugoslavian border, and then to the Low Countries, and working there. And part of working there was sending some people to Germany to look for survivors. So it's a very involved operation that lasted a year and more after the war ended.
Well, your father and all the people that he worked with were definitely heroes, and I'm glad that this is now being published in English so that more people can know about this story.
Yes, the point is, in Hebrew, there is a lot of material of various types. And if you really want to, you can research. And also there are the second generation of those who served in the brigade and in the British Army in general. So the knowledge is not lost. But outside Israel, there is hardly serious material about the Jewish Brigade. How did it come to be? And what did it do? So in that sense, I think I feel very happy that it is now out in the public domain.
We've been talking to Yael Driver, and you're the editor of the new book.
That's right. We didn't talk about the myth that have been kind of promoted about the brigade, but maybe it's not really important at this stage.
I want to say before I forget is the reason that the two of us came into contact in the first place is that I did a podcast on Mickey Marcus, and you emailed me and you sent me your article, and then when I found out you were coming out with a new book, I invited you on the show.
Thank you. I think the Mickey Marcus deserves another discussion. You know, there's also a lot of stories and legends that need to be put right. But that's a separate thing. I just wanted to talk about two things. One is the importance of the brigade, to summarize. And two is something that you, I think, mentioned, is what inspiration can withdraw from the Jewish Brigade. To summarize the importance of the brigade, I would say three things. The Jewish Brigade was the only military unit in the huge Allied forces, including the British Army, that operated under a Jewish flag and a Jewish insignia. It therefore represented not only the 1.3 million Jews who fought in the Allied nation armies, Russia, USA, European, etc., but also allowed non-serving world Jewry to walk tall. I hope you understand what I mean by that. And this is why actually the Museum of the Jewish Soldier is in Israel, in Latrun, and not in America or in Russia or whatever. The second thing is that the brigade work in Europe after the war, which we kind of touched about, the meeting, the caring, the orienting, and ensuring that Sherit HaPleta, or the survivors, declared Palestine as their preferred destination for immigration, was the most significant contributor to the subsequent UN decision for the partition or the creation of the State of Israel. That was a major, major, major thing. And the third point, I would say, you kind of alluded to it in the beginning, the brigade members, together with the other 25,000 Jewish Palestinian volunteers to the British Army, formed the bedrock for the IDF, using the skills gained in the British Army. No other local Jewish paramilitary group can claim anywhere near such contribution. That's why it's important. The inspiration, I would say, and this may be kind of maybe topical for today, the spirit of volunteering to sacrifice personal goals in favor of pursuing a common cause. We see it in IDF today. The recognition of the importance of unity despite diverse political affiliation in challenging time. Super important. And in the brigade, there were people from various political affiliation. But once it came to working or fighting, these have disappeared. There was no dissent, there was unity. The third part, which should be inspiring, is the pertinacity showed by the Yishuv members, the volunteers, the courage, the conviction, the little kind of stubbornness in following one's goal. Don't give in. Even after 4 years, continue to wish and fight for deployment as a fighting force. And the fourth, the decision-making process that took effect while the brigade was in Europe, exemplifying in no small measure the restraint and multifaceted review of options, ensuring cold-headed decision-making. So here I didn't speak about revenge, which was one of the myths, but there was a need for pretty strong, restrained leadership to make sure the brigade doesn't suffer from individual wishes to do this, that, and the other, which would harm the collective. So there the defense rests unless you have other questions.
No, that's a lot of material, and I'm glad that I have the ability to share it, and I thank you for doing all this research.
You're welcome.
Once again, the name of the book is Dance of the Fire, The Jewish Brigade in World War II, Facts, Myths, Appraisals by Shlomo Shamir, author, and Yael Driver, editor.
That is correct. The Yael Driver you can drop.
Okay.
But I am the editor, I admit, and I did work a lot to get this together, but the applaud is for the Jewish volunteers from Palestine.
Yael, thank you very much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a moment in Jewish history. I am your host, Ben Bresky, and for any questions or comments and past shows, you can visit benbresky.substack.com. Thank you for listening, and shalom.